And as usual, I will give everybody one more minute to get on, and then I'll start in with the somewhat repetitive and boring welcome message. So give people a few minutes to get on just in case they're having any difficulties or delays. I do see that we have 32 participants, so not bad for a nice Saturday morning. And I've got 9:01, so let's dive into the etiquette stuff. But first off, just welcome everybody. Glad that you're taking some time out your Saturday morning to join the Snohomish County Ham Club Zoom meeting. Zoom etiquette protocols, we have muted everybody, and we ask that you keep yourself muted until you have something to say. If you do have something to say, you can go ahead and unmute yourself, raise your hand. Use the raise your hand feature. We'll try to watch the video. If you're waving your hand in front of your face like this, we'll usually catch you. But with 32 frames, we may miss you. So please use the raise the hand feature. And also, just to really help Ann out, if you could have your first name, last name, and your call sign, that's really helpful in doing our accounting and knowing who's all on. If you don't know how to put your call sign on, if you hover over your box in the top, there's 3 dots. Click those 3 dots, and it gives you an opportunity to change your name. And you can just add your call sign in behind your name. Or if your name is incorrect, correct it for us. As Dave and the automated voice said, this meeting is being recorded. If you have concerns about that, you have a few options. You can turn your video off so that we can't see you. Or you can drop out of the meeting and then watch the meeting afterwards on a recorded, and that way you won't be in the recording. If you have any questions or concerns on that, any of that, just reach out to myself or Ann after the meeting. Do we have any first-time visitors or guests? Raise your hand, wave your hand in front of your face. According to my quick check, we're not having any new visitors or guests today. If I've missed you, please let us know. You can also use the chat feature. We're going to be monitoring that to the best of our abilities as well. So feel free to throw questions up there as well. With that, let's dive into the business part of the meeting, and we'll start off with the secretary minutes. Ann?
Thank you. I posted the minutes for May, the May meeting, which was our last meeting since we had field day in June, on May 27th to the website. And I haven't had any changes. So is there a motion to approve?
Motion to accept. Motion's been made. A second.
Seconded.
Motion's been seconded. Any discussion? Minutes are approved as posted. Next, we'll go into the treasurer's report. Randy, are you ready for your treasurer's report?
Yeah, I'm ready. Can you see it?
It's loading. There we go.
Treasurer's report for July. We had $463.22 income and expenses $346.47. We have $8,810 in the checking account, $605 in the repeater maintenance fund. The endowment is chugging along at a nice rate. It's now valued at $16,159.21. That's over the amounts that's contributed, that's $7,146.21 in gain. And our general investment is also perking a little bit. We have $743.42. That's an increase of $170.58. That's the treasurer's report. Any questions?
Hearing no questions, is there a motion to accept?
I make a motion to accept the treasurer's report.
Second from Ann.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Approved as presented. Let's go on to the VE report, which is Randy as well.
Not much to report. We have some VEs as part of our club that are participating in the Lake Washington Ham Club's online VE testing. And that continues, and we're doing quite well. Hopefully we'll get back to in-person meetings again, and we can start our own group back up again, but that's it.
Well, thank you for that update, Randy. Next is going to be an education report. I'm not sure that we'll have anything there either, but Jim, if you're on the call, do you have anything to say? Not sure Jim's on the call. I don't believe that we've had anything new in that area again with the whole COVID stuff. There's been little activity in that. There's been some activity, but not a lot, and probably nothing new to report. We will bring that up next meeting and see if there's any more to add to it. John, are you raising your hand?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Basically, I sent Jim a copy of Lake Washington's upcoming, they're having a watch-a-thon, or so, I don't know what they call it, but essentially they're going to be running a couple hours a night training for getting technician license. And I'm not sure what he's done with that. So, but Lake Washington's got something coming up, and it would be all from viewing from your screen. And then after that, the last one, I think they'll schedule everybody for testing.
And so if you want more information on that, probably the best thing is to Google the Lake Washington Ham Club and get information from there directly.
Yep.
But if you do have questions, feel free to, and can't find the information, feel free to reach out to myself or John or one of the board members.
Or
With
Jim.
that, oh, go ahead. Okay. With that, we'll go on to the new member introduction. Ann?
Good morning. We did have one new member in June. We didn't have a meeting in June, so I'm announcing her now. It's Kelsey Brenton, KJ7YAT.
Well, welcome. And I'm hoping that I'm looking and seeing if she's on this call. I'm not seeing her, but hopefully she'll be able to join us. With that, we're going to move on to the list of members. Also, Ann. Ann's going to read off the list of everybody who is attending. If she does not read your name, please put it into the chat so we can catch you.
Yes, as he said, so I've been marking the people that I've seen in the window, and a few people just joined, and I didn't probably get you down, but I will read off this list, and if I did not list your name, please send me a private chat. So the first person is W7 DEB, Dennis Bradford. K7 ITM, Tom Bruns. KJ7YL, Stephen Burling. KC7YL, Carrie Burnett. AF7KB, Michael Burnett. W0FLZ, Paige Butler. KI7OYP, Phyllis DeSoto. KC7WWO, Meg Engelter. AB7RK, Gary Evans. K2MTN, myself, Ann Garay. K7BGG, Bruce Gary. N7OBI, Curtis Green. KK7M, Lauren Hole. F7WVT Roger Hoot, N7PKK Tom Hutchison, KJ7ENF Randy Johnson, KJ7AKV Tim Kephart, AJ7B Randy Mather, KE7FQJ Mary O'Farrell, K7NWR Alan Person, KH6VM Henry Polland, W7ACM Greg Rainwater, N7SRR Stephen Ramsayer, W7SLW Ken Rich, KC7YE Jack Rucard, KG7WYU Peter Sampson, KD7AVP Ray Smith, our president, KI7DPP Dave Summers, N7XLD Jordan Thompson, N7AME John Van Dalen, KJ7KEO David Walker, KJ7KZE Douglas Walker, KB7SOL Eldon Wallstad, K7II Chris Wartes, KJ7ARR James Wells. So if I didn't read your name, put it in the chat, and thank you, and back to Ray.
Thank you very much for that, Ann, and thanks to everybody for attending. According to Zoom, we're now up to 41 participants, so not bad for a Saturday morning. That's nice. With that, we're going to move on to the repeater update. Rob was not able to make it due to a conflict. He's going to try to come in towards the end of the meeting. Not sure if he'll be able to make it or not, but basically all that he had for us was the repeaters have been functioning fairly well. We have had a couple of times where Echolink has dropped off and had to be reset. If anybody notices that Echolink is offline, or for that matter, anything else with the repeater, reach out to myself or Rob, and we will, or Henry also, and we will work to get it back up and fixed if there's any issues. With that, I'm going to move on and see, Henry, did you have anything to add in regard to repeaters?
No, I didn't there. And you're right. If Echolink goes down, you can drop me an email or send me a text, and I'll swing by and see what's going on. It's usually the Windows updates that gets us.
Yeah, and there's been some discussion about, using something other than Windows.
Yeah, we've been working on it, kind of, Ray.
Yep. It's something that if somebody has an interest in helping us on that, send us an email, reach out to us somehow, let us know. But we are considering other options, but it takes time and, work on our part, and we will do the best. But for the most part, it's been fairly functional. And if there is a problem, let us know and we'll quickly reset it.
Ray, there's a question in chat about getting bearings to the repeater from your QTH. I don't know, since we're on repeater, maybe you want to hit that.
Are you talking about what's showing up in the repeater book?
There's a chat question about a program that check the chat.
Yeah, how I'm reading it, Gary Evans is asking if where the repeater's at. The repeater is downtown Everett on the Baker building, Bakerview building.
Ray,
Yes.
let me interject if you don't mind. There is a program that does propagation, especially at the UHF, VHF propagation. And I did a program for him from his house to the repeater, from the repeater to his house. And I also did it for the Everett ACS, but, and it kind of basically shows there's a big hole at 16, at Bakerview at his, from his house. And something's blocking it on the way down. And he asked me for the program itself, and I just found it, and I was going to send it to him. But do you want me to send it to everybody? It's a
Yeah,
weird little program, and it takes a little bit effort to figure it out, but
yeah, if you want to go ahead and post a link to
Okay,
it or
I can do that.
something that would be awesome. And then if people want to look into it, they can go ahead and do that.
Yeah, this was a project between him and I, and like I say, the Everett ACS. And because Roger was having trouble getting the ACS repeater down in Linwood.
And that was intended as a private.
Should be there now.
And I do apologize to everybody for not hitting the right button there.
No
Is
problem.
it there now? In the chat?
No.
Negative.
Oh,
I had a question. I was trying to wave my hand. I was
Go
wondering
ahead.
when you're saying you're going to go to other options, computers, you're talking about, going to Linux or something to that effect, or like a different operating system?
That's exactly correct, Steve.
Oh, interesting. Okay, very good. Thank you.
hopefully you only get one copy.
Apparently there's chats being difficult. It's only letting you talk to either everybody or Dave. So, feel free to go ahead and do everybody if you have something that's important to say.
It's the nature of ham radio.
And Zoom. Okay, with that, we're going to go ahead and move into old business. One of the really important, or at least I feel very important things was working with Lauren in regards to the investment committee. I had misunderstood and thought that he was wanting to back out of it, and he has graciously corrected me and stated that he still is very interested in maintaining it. And so thank you so much. We really appreciate all that you've done with that. So we're glad to have Lauren continuing with his role on the financial committee. But that still goes, if we do have club members that are interested in joining, reach out to us and share that, and we will see if it's appropriate to fit you in. Next thing on old business is net control operators. Same type of thing. We're always looking for net control operators. If anybody in the club has an interest in that, we do have a training program and we have documentation. It's fairly easy. The most important thing is that you be able to reach the repeater fairly solidly. If you can reach our repeater reasonably well and you're interested in being a net controller, let us know, because we would love to have you join that group. Any questions or comments on that at this time?
Victor has his hand up. No, Victor does not have his hand up. I'll lower it.
Okay, hearing nothing, feel free to reach out to us if you do have any questions, comments, concerns, desire to join the net controllers. Just let us know and we will talk you through it. The next thing is going to be a field day recap. Tim, can you give us your update?
Yes, I can. Let me share the results. This was the results that were submitted to the awards committee. It was a little sparse this year, but our main goal when we talked about this in the board meetings was to get all the equipment out, look it over, see what needed to be worked on and repaired and replaced. And we did have some issues that we dealt with, from rusty parts on the trailers to water in the antenna tubes. So it was a good effort to get everything out and look at it and evaluate what needed to be worked on and what needed to be replaced or upkept. So it was a great turnout that way. The weather was extremely hot. For those of you that were smart enough to stay inside and enjoy the air-conditioned rooms. I greatly support your or salute your intelligence and your wisdom in doing that. For the rest of us out there that were sweating and dying, it was hot. I do appreciate everybody that did come out and help set up and tear down. We had a great time. We had some new members come out and get on the equipment, and some people try FT8 that hadn't operated in the past. It was a good time. I really appreciate everybody that showed up and helped during this event. Other than that, that was pretty much it. Like I said, it was mainly just to get the equipment out and look at it because we were still in partial COVID. So other than that, it was a great event. Any questions?
Anne?
I just want to say from all of us, thank you so much for all your effort. It was a huge effort, and I thought it went really well.
And I'll certainly echo that. I definitely had the opportunity to be there a fair amount of the time. It was really good to get back and see everybody. It was really good to get our equipment out. Definitely found a few things that we need to look at and address, but it was really nice having the equipment out and functioning in use. So definitely looking forward to more and more of that as we get the COVID figured out and how we want to best proceed. Moving into, or anything else before we move into new business?
There's a question in chat, Ray. May I invite non-club individuals to a meeting if I feel there's an interesting topic for them, or should I share the subsequent Zoom recording?
Anne?
If you want to invite non-members, that's fine. You need to have email me or have them email me, and I will forward the invite. That's how we get new members, is basically people contact us, they reach out, and they'll often email to the secretary at WA7LAW, and I will send them the invite. So go ahead.
Tom is waving his hand. N7 PKK. Nope. I'll unmute you. I'm gonna try.
Thanks. Every once in a while, somebody puts a bug in my ear about checking with the hospital with regard to our room. So I followed through and sent them an email and asked them when they expected to be opening rooms up for non-hospital groups. And they responded in a very non-committal manner, saying that they were not letting out rooms at this point. And that's all they'd say. So what that means is I'll be checking in with them every few months and try to keep the club posted.
Thank you very much for that update, Tom. And that is a perfect lead in to new business, where the first item was talking about meeting in person. As Tom indicated, many of our members are expressing interest, and I certainly myself would love to get back to some face-to-face meetings. And so we are looking into it. Right now, the best option appears to be the Boys and Girls Club up in Arlington. There has certainly been some feedback that Arlington is a ways north for many of us. Of course, those who live on the north end really like that idea. So Rob was going to give us something of an update, but he's not able to be here. But just know that we are looking into it. We definitely want to get back to in-person meetings. Our thought process at this point is that we would have a meeting location where we can meet face-to-face, but that we would also do a Zoom. So those who either can't make it or have concerns about the environment would be able to continue using Zoom as they have done before. Quite frankly, the feedback that I've been getting is there are some people who really enjoy the Zoom aspect, particularly some of the, we have some club members and we have some former club members who are not even in the state of Washington anymore, who use this as an opportunity to join us. So I have a feeling that we will continue with Zoom as an option, but strongly would like to get back to face-to-face meetings. So stay tuned for that. We are really trying to have our August meeting have an opportunity for face-to-face. So watch your email, watch the reflector, listen to the nets. If we are able to work this out, we will definitely have that information pushed out in as many different methods as we can, because we would certainly like to have a face-to-face option. Any questions or comments on that?
Yeah, Ray, this is Dave. Providence was a few weeks ago. They were down to 17 folks hospitalized with COVID, and they're up to like 35 now. So it's jumped significantly. I think it's going to be a while before Providence is an option.
Yes, everything that I'm hearing from all the different sources, particularly because of the hospital aspect, it may be one of the last places to come back. Yes, we would absolutely love to get back into Providence. It seemed to be a good location that worked for a lot of people. But I think that we may have an interim solution, because I don't think that we're going to be back in the hospital very soon. So we'll probably do something else just so we can get back to having some face-to-face. But I suspect Providence will be some time before it happens.
Hey, Ray, Henry. I think it's a good idea. You know, it can be a hybrid with in person and Zoom. That'd be great. But if we're talking about the Boys and Girls Club up there, are they also entertaining the idea of maybe doing the VE testing over there also?
So that's in discussion. We don't have an answer for that yet. All this is, sort of a evolving situation, and as we figure it out, we will keep everybody updated.
Yeah, I appreciate the effort. Thank you.
Victor's been waving his hand.
Victor?
Mr. Chairman, with respect to the hospitals and such, talking with one of the nurses at my clinic not too long ago, and she said that their corporation may decide that their staff is going to wear masks while at work permanently. This healthcare is a wake-up call for a lot of people in a lot of different industries, and medical support especially. And so I'm wondering, and it's not my place, but it's just the idea that if we even have a chance in the future to get back in new places like hospitals for meetings like this, I think it'll be a long time coming. But that's the trend. It seems that the medical industry is really closing down on how their staff is going to be properly equipped as we move forward. Thank you.
Yes, I think that we all realize that we're in an evolving world. Things are changing. Things always seem to change. And we will just have to figure out what those changes are and how they impact us and what's the best path forward. Something that as a group, our membership will certainly be involved in the discussion, and you'll have opportunities to provide input and feedback. Anything else before I move on? So the next thing that we have is t-shirt orders. Yay, something positive and fun to talk about. Anne, did you want to talk about that?
Yes, thanks, Ray. Several people at Field Day asked me about doing a t-shirt order, so I'm going to organize one. We will use the same vendor we had last time, and I will be sending an email to the members on the reflector with info about how to order. Last time it was like click on a link and go in, and it was paid by using your credit card on the website of the business that does the t-shirts. So, but, and I'll be making plans to deliver them to you. So keep an eye out for that to come. And the t-shirts will look like this one I have on now. It'll have our club insignia, your call sign, your first name, and the back will have the big club insignia. So, all right. So that's it. Back to Ray on that one.
Well, excellent. Definitely looking forward to more information on that. Any questions from the membership before we move on? Randy?
I wanted to ask, are you not gonna do the gray one like Ray's wearing right now?
Last time we had an option for gray or black, and we can do gray, I believe. I haven't
Okay.
yet. I need to do it this week.
Just my 2 cents. I strongly like the gray because the black tends to cook you in our hot days. So definitely having both of them is a welcomed option. Any other questions or comments on the shirts before we move on? I see Roger.
Just on the color of the shirt, I have both, and I really enjoy the black ones during the winter. And during field day, I wore the gray one because of the weather. I would point out that it seems to me the name and call sign and all that are not as distinct. There's not as much contrast. I think you're easier to be identified with the black. I just throw that out for my experience.
Any other comments? I agree with everything Roger said. Well, not seeing anything. Let's go ahead and move on. The next update is Special Service Club with ARRL. Ann, you want to update us on that?
Yes, thanks, Ray. I just wanted to let the members know that our club has renewed our ARRL Special Service Club status through June 9th of 2023. So if you go to the ARRL website and search for, it's kind of for people who are trying to get into radio. We do a lot of things, our training in the past, which we will be doing again soon, and our VE testing, which we will be starting up again soon. So anyway, just want to let you guys know. Back to Ray.
Any questions or comments on that from anyone? Seeing nothing, we will move on. The next item, it's getting to be that time of year. The year is going by quickly. Club elections are coming up. Dennis Bradford, W7DB, as usual, is running our elections. We do have a number of positions coming up. John Van Dalen and 7AME will have served 2 terms. I, as president, have served 2 terms, and so I'm also being term limited out. There will be a number of different positions coming up. Please, let us know, particularly if you're interested. Let us know that. If you know of somebody that you think would be great for a position, either talk to them or talk to us. We'd love to get that information in and start looking at some new board membership for next year. I know it seems like that's a long ways off, but it's going to come quickly. So please provide us with your thoughts and feedback as soon as possible. Dennis, did you have anything you wanted to add?
He's on mute.
Dennis, you're muted. Oh, there you go.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, just good morning, everybody, and be thinking about running for the offices. We'll let you know what positions are open. And like Ray said, we've got people that have had 2 terms, and it's time for somebody else to step up. And we'll be sorting through that. And if you would like to be on the nominating committee, let me know. So that's it, Ray. Thank you.
Thank you for all you're doing on this, Dennis. Is there any other questions, comments, or feedback on the upcoming elections? Not seeing anything in the positive anyway, so I think we'll go ahead and move on. This has actually concluded all of our agenda items. Is there any other new business? Anybody who has something new for the good of the club?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, it's Victor Harris.
Go ahead, Victor.
Going back a step and thinking about the medical situation and medical concern. A lot of what we do around ham radio is emergency operations, emergency preparation. I'm curious if we have a small supply of masks and gloves on the trailer. If something happens in the next 20 minutes, we're not going to be able to run to the store and get the mask because we're going to be doing other things as we start to light up the trailer and such. So having a small supply available for that emergency situation, just throw that out and let it fester for a while. Thank you.
That is an absolutely great idea. I believe that we do have gloves already there, but an addition of some masks will be great. In addition to the role as your club president, I also fill the role of quartermaster. And so I'm going to take that as a action item for myself. And I'm going to add putting some, at least just paper masks in there, the basic masks. So we will at least have something available to us. So great idea. Thank you.
Hey, Ray,
Yes.
along with the trailer and the moisture issues, have we thought about hanging some desiccant bags or something in the trailer to keep it drier?
We really need to go more than that. Desiccant bags are not adequate. We really want to get a dehumidifier put in.
Yeah, that would be great.
The dehumidifier is here. It just needs to be installed.
Excellent. I'll help work on that and get that installed because I think that that's really the answer to it. With the value of the equipment we have in there, I think it's well worth the effort to put it in. Any other questions or comments?
I just put in a chat that August 7th, which is a Saturday, I'm going to have a ham fest here at the house, along with the Northwest neighborhood of Everett's having the mother of all garage sales. So we'll have household telephones and ham gear that I've been
Great
collecting over the
opportunity
years.
to add to your collection. So if anybody has any interest in adding to their collection, definitely check out the garage sales and
it's 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. I forgot to put the dash in between. And early shoppers are encouraged. You know where I live. Thank you.
Any other new business? So
I move we adjourn the regular meeting and proceed to the presentation. This is Ann.
a motion has been made to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second?
Seconded.
We have a second. Any discussion? So this concludes the business proportion of the meeting, and now we get to go into the really interesting and fun part of it. A big thank you to David, W7DAO, who has offered to do the presentation on antennas. David, we really appreciate it. Thank you so much for taking time out of a Saturday to do this presentation for us. Any questions before I turn it over to David? All right, David, you are on. I am going to drop off and the official meeting is now closed, and now comes the interesting part. Thanks you, everyone.
Well, I'll have to hope that it's an interest that you guys find it interesting. So thank you very much for allowing me to talk to you guys today and give you a presentation. My name is David Oak, and as you can see, W7DAO. I'm a member of the American Red Cross Disaster Services team and Mass Care team, as well as the Mike and Key Amateur Radio Club. VE, and I've also periodically teach tech, general, and extra classes. Although with COVID, I've been offline on that. So again, I thank you for letting me participate. Also, when I'm addressing, a class, I know exactly what level everybody's at. In the case of a club, when I'm addressing them, everyone's at different levels. And so some people will find it, well, I know that. Some people will find that, oh, this is new. But most importantly, I will be periodically stopping the presentation, asking for questions, and also asking for any comments. That is anything you want to share that in your experience that would amplify the information a little bit more to the benefit of the others. So feel free to jump in and share briefly and concisely when you have something you want to add. And of course, feel free to ask questions. I will not be able to see the chat. So if you put questions in chat, I'll probably have to pick them up after the presentation when I close off my presentation screen. So feel free to go on audio when you're asking me a question during the breaks. So thanks again for letting me present. And it was interesting when we were emailing back and forth, and I suggested, well, I have 8 subjects here's 8 subjects that you might want to choose. And they said, well, we'll choose 3 of them. And I'm going like, okay, and that's a lot of subject to do, and then it was thrown out as antennas. So we'll see where we go, but hopefully it'll be something interesting for everyone. This is kind of the way I look at ham radio. The essence of amateur radio resides in the human desire for connection and community. Of course, there's technical aspects, but I think for me, that is the essence of it, as we can see by the fact that we form clubs spontaneously, so to speak, come together for various events, etc. So I thought I'd focus on, antennas is a big subject. And because it's a large subject, you can talk about it in so many different ways. And there's so many different varieties of antenna. Although I would say that in a lot of respects, all those varieties of antenna are flavors of about 5 basic ideas. And so you'll find when you look at all these, 200 or so different variations of antenna, they're all playing off about anywhere between 3 to 5 different basic design concepts. But I thought I'd focus a little bit more on going portable in this talk. And the first thing I'd like to do is just to outline the obvious considerations. When you're going portable, what's the safety of yourself and others? Am I going to be operating off of a top of a summit and I'm on the edge of a cliff? Is that the, am I considering safety? If the wind comes up, what's going to happen, et cetera? I've got people around me in a campsite or, and I'm running a lot of power because I have a generator, what's the RF safety involved in that? Obviously, as I just mentioned, transmit power, the weight, if I'm even in a car situation, am I filling the entire car with every piece of gear I have? Am I going to hike? How much equipment can I take when I'm hiking? How much weight can I reasonably carry? At what range and at what kind of difficulty of the hike? And then how complex is the setup? Obviously, when you're going to be doing something when you're hiking in, you want a very simple, almost pre-assembled modular setup. And even when you're car camping, you want something similar but you may be able to tolerate a lot more complexity than when you're hiking. And so you want to think about and plan. This is a logistical endeavor. This is the planning the expedition type of mode. And it may be you're not going out to some faraway island, but you're still going to a summit. And if you've never done that before with your equipment, you need to think about what is logistics and complexity you want to handle. Obviously, I talked about RF safety a little bit, but RF safety is always there. The operating environment, what is that going to be at the top of that summit or on that hike in that campsite? What am I going to be operating around? Is there going to be a place to put up antennas if I need to swing something into a tree? Well, guess what? On a summit, you may not see a tree. Or if you're at a campsite, you may be so surrounded by trees that at some frequencies, it's going to inhibit your ability to function, as some of the RF might get absorbed at certain frequencies by some of the foliage. And of course, visitors or the looky-loos that come up to you. And that's a good thing because we're always ambassadors for the hobby. But at the same time, we also don't want to spend hours and hours talking to people because we're there because we want to make contacts. So, but be respectful, remember you are the ambassador of the hobby. And also I oftentimes will invite people, do you want to make a contact? And I will, guide them through the process of making a contact, sort of like a field day, get on the air station So always consider that. There may be some people who will get upset with you being there. Why are you putting technology in my nature? Why are you running RF so close to my campsite? I don't believe it's safe what you're doing. So be aware of that. Also be aware that at night at the campsites and other places, you should take your antennas down or retract them so that if people at night are walking with flashlights or and they don't actually run right through your guy wires. So I use very bright guy wires. I also bring my antenna mast down when I'm camping so that I can avoid people causing problems if they're running or walking around at night, or animals for that matter. So just a couple of concerns. I'm sure most of these are obvious to everyone, but just to always keep them in mind when you're going portable. I thought I'd start with some simple stuff, some basic ideas about this. And one I think that is very common for HF is a linked dipole. And I've heard this called a lot of different things, but I think the most common name I've heard is linked. And what it basically is, if you look on the right of your screen, is that what we have is a dipole of the lowest frequency length of what you're going to operate. And then we break the antenna up into shorter lengths based on the different bands you want to operate. And we can connect and disconnect those lengths using anything from power poles to spade lugs like these, or even a pigtail, which actually I don't recommend. It's important though, when you put one of these antennas together, and you can see this little rectangle on the right represents a piece of plexiglass with 2 holes in it. Whatever you do, you want to strain relief these ends of the wires on both ends of that plexiglass, or whatever insulator you're using to hold that together. Because one, you don't want the lugs to pull apart because the strain on the antenna from the mounting system on the left and right of the antennas. And also you want to make sure that you're not ending up in a situation where you're fatiguing the wires over time, because you're constantly putting this up and down, and you're turning things on and off, and or opening connections and closing connections, and stretching and contracting. So strain relieving is really important on this, whether you loop around the hole once or use a cable tie strain relief. Whatever you do, you want to strain relief so the connectors do not have undue strain on them. There's always discussions on whether you solder or crimp connectors. I will tell you the ideal situation is if you have the right tool. Crimping is always superior way of doing a connection for these. I do know people crimp and solder. I do know people solder. Generally speaking, people tend to solder. I think the tendency is to solder when you don't have the right tool. And there's nothing wrong with crimping and soldering. It's an extra step. It's often unnecessary. In a lot of respects, long-term use, solder is actually worse than a crimp, but nothing wrong with soldering and crimping, but ideally a crimp with a good tool is enough. Typically, what you want to see is, even though you have one of these setups, it's like any other dipole, and you're going to need a balun if you're going to attach coax to a balanced line to a dipole. So remember, you have to compensate for the weight of the dipole. Now, in most situations, when you're doing hiking and camping, you're in QRP, which means things can get much smaller. The wire doesn't have to be as big a diameter. The baluns don't have to be as big and heavy. So keep that in mind, that you may need a different setup for going portable. So you're taking some of the weight off of the mast that you're carrying, or off of how you're stringing the line. You can also configure this as a sloper. And there's a nice calculator link here that if you want to calculate these lengths, but it's the standard formula, really, pretty much the standard formula for doing that. And notice I'm using a mast here. This is a very light fiberglass mast that I carry with me when I'm camping for portable for operating in the woods where I've been hiking in. I don't always carry a mast because it's extra work, extra heavy weight, but I plan ahead of time that there's going to be trees somewhere that I can throw a line up in a tree. And one of the things I use for throwing lines up in the tree is I have a 1 pound fishing weight tied to mason line, or to any twine, rope, or jute you want. And I basically toss it up into the highest branch I can. Now, I will tell you that when you use a weight like that, it's really good at bringing the line down through foliage. However, it also is really good when you miss, or something happens and it becomes a pendulum, that it goes after your head. So be aware of where that is, because otherwise you'll be very surprised when you get knocked out by your weight, which I won't say has happened to me, but I've had to do a little bit of dodgeball. Also, if you throw it, you have to be aware that sometimes that line can have enough momentum that it actually turns around the branch a few times. At that case, carry a second weight because you're done. You're not going to get that weight back most likely. So you have to be aware of that. I know people use potato launchers, but again, extra thing to carry, more complexity. And then once I have that up in the tree, then I can, of course, raise a line. Now, when you have a dipole, you're going to have 3 lines if you're going to go horizontal. And so you need to plan accordingly and think about that. So just as a quick introduction, everything I've just said pretty much applies to every antenna we're going to talk about. The other thing to remember is that even though dipoles traditionally are horizontal, there's nothing wrong with making a dipole vertical. And in a lot of respects, when you're in limited space, when you're hiking or camping, a vertical dipole is a very handy thing to do. You don't have to have the same amount of space, and you can obviously hang one end from the tree and one can dangle down with a small weight at the end. But what you need to also remember, and this could be also hung from a tree, is the feed point must come off at a right angle to the coax must come off at a right angle to the feed point for, let's say, depending, roughly anywhere between 5 or more feet. Generally, I go with 5 feet, but that has to do with providing a better, not manipulating the impedance. If you come down, just let it drop, it's going to change the expected impedance a bit. So you want it to come off at a vertical, perpendicular to the line. But vertical dipoles, very well, nice, easy to do. It gives you that, if it's at the right height, it's going to give you a decent steady impedance. And again, it's easy because versus a horizontal dipole, you don't need 3 mounting locations. You really only need 1 or 2 at the most when you want to make sure you hang the coax properly. Also, another one that's useful in the field is an off-center fed dipole. It's useful on multiple bands. Doesn't mean it's efficient on multiple bands. As you guys know, a dipole is generally only good for its highest efficiency at one frequency, the frequencies it's designed for. And then it degrades on either side as you change frequencies. And if you change to a different band, the efficiency will change as well. And also the pattern coming off the antenna, of course, will change. Traditionally, an off-center fed dipole is 6634, or if you want to say 6733, depends on how you break the fraction. And at that realm, you have about 200 ohm impedance at about 20 to 30 feet. In this case, you would want to use a 4-to-1 current balun to match that impedance to the 50 ohms of your transmitter. If you go up higher than 30 feet, oftentimes the literature says the impedance has changed. As you know, impedance will change with altitude, so to speak, and you'll need a 6-to-1 balun. As you move the feed point left and right, the impedance is going to change. So if you were to use a different ratio, then you would need to measure that to know what balun to use because your impedance will change. These do need an RF choke. If your balun does not include a choke, you will need to add an RF choke to this as well. It's still going to have some unbalancedness that you need to cut out. Now, in a Windom off-center fed dipole, where they, as you can see in the configuration I'm using here, that lower black rectangle on the coax is below the feed point significantly. A Windom off-center fed dipole does that on purpose because the intention is that some of the SWR, some of the reflected power coming back down the braid will radiate. And so use that as a vertical arm to do that. And of course, these do use a tuner. So when you're going to go to the field, you want to think, I'm going to need to have a tuner. Does my radio have a tuner built in? Does that tuner have enough range? For example, the FT991A, which is what I have, has basically can do a 3-to-1 match on its automatic antenna tuner, which means for most of these very strange portable setups, it's not going to work very well. It's not going to have enough range. So I actually have an external tuner that I use for my FT991A to handle those wider ranges of impedance that I have to match. And so you have to consider that as well. And again, what power requirements you need will determine what size tuner you need. So that's some of the considerations when you're going this route, or at home for that matter, right? Fan dipoles, I actually use a fan dipole when camping as well from time to time for 15 and 20 meters. And I use the configuration tradition that's on the right when I throw it up into a tree. And the reason I use that is because it's easier. To be honest with you, that's the easy configuration. You basically have these 3 dipoles from one point, in this case, 3 dipoles. It could be as many as you want at one feed point. And it's automatic band switching. So as you probably know, the current's going to take the path of least resistance or least impedance. And so the maximum current is going to flow to the band that has the least impedance. So if you're on the 10-meter band, it's going to favor the dipole on the 10-meter band. However, if you're doing this at home and you have the space, the ideal situation is that none of these fan dipole antennas should be in the same plane with each other, because they will interact with each other. And if you were to tune the one on the right, you'll get a slightly different length than if you tune the one on the left, because there is an interaction between these different dipoles. So ideally, if you're at home and you have the space, a fan dipole should be run roughly at least 60 degrees away from each other, as much as you can, depending on, so that they reduce the interference between the antennas. Before I go on to the next one, any questions or comments or people would like to add to the story here or their own experience? And again, I can't see the chat, so you have to sort of speak up. You know, a good joke.
David,
Go ahead.
David, I was going to say that our club used a fan dipole when we had field day. So it's interesting to hear about more information about the fan dipole.
So which configuration do you guys traditionally use?
I'm definitely not the expert on antennas. Anybody else?
The right or left?
It was the configuration on the right.
Yep. And like I said, that's the more traditional one because it's, from a point of view of space, it's more economical and it's easier. The one on the left is ideal, but obviously you need to have a lot more mounting points in the for that kind of antenna. But I guarantee you, your experience probably shows it works fine, right? The one on the right probably does you fine.
Yes. Based on the location, it's certainly the one on the right is much easier, which is why we've always done it. But you've definitely intrigued me. At my own residence, I would like to try the other one just to see how that works. So thank you.
My pleasure. And there's a lot written on that configuration, so you'll probably find something in the ARL antenna book or online. If you're like me, I have the antenna book, but I find that it's faster for me to get information online, and it's got usually more depth. So, but yeah, there's a lot written on that kind of configuration. Okay, any other questions before I go on or comments?
Yes, real quick. You spoke earlier about having to change, what was it, the baling when you went, as you increased your elevation. So I'm curious if the baseline was set at sea level, was it set at 1,000 feet? And as you go up, and I understand every antenna is different, every situation is different, but is there a point where you realize that you need to change? Would that be every 1,000 feet, every 2,500 feet? Is there a rule of thumb on some of that?
Well, first, let me, thanks for bringing it up. The reference point for the height of the antenna is your local ground level. So when I talk about 20 feet and 30 feet, that's relative to your ground level, not to sea level. So at my house, which is about 150 feet above sea level, that's the 0 point, because that's where my ground is my physical ground, earth, is going to be relative to the height of my antenna. So it's only relative to your local earth, dirt ground, and not to sea level. And so generally speaking, impedance will change as you go up. In this antenna, the rule of thumb is from about 20 to 30 feet, you should be able to be fine with 200 ohms through a 4-to-1 current column, and then let your antenna tuner do the rest. And then from 30 feet to about 50 feet, 6-to-1 is what usually is chosen. And again, it's not going to be an exact situation. You let the tuner do the rest of the work. Above that point of 50 feet, I don't have any data, and I've never gone up that high, so I don't know personally. Does that help answer your question?
So we're talking about the antenna height itself, not whether you're at sea level or if you're on top.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right, thank you. That's my misunderstanding.
No,
Thank
thanks for asking. So the other one that's really common, and whether it's you're talking VHF and UHF, which we use a lot of these on, or for HF, is a ground plane with and without a coil. And this is actually one of my default setups, although it doesn't look like this. This is just illustration, of course. And then I have a 16-foot vertical telescope, or vertical 16-foot telescoping whip that I have on a loading coil. And this allows me to get into the 40-meter band. I can remove the loading coil if I need to and go only with the 16-foot whip to take anything that is 20 meters and higher. Generally speaking, I found that the 16-foot telescoping whip, I generally need about another 12 inches of length when I have this on my analyzer. So I actually do operate with the coil oftentimes on 20 meters, and I'll just use a couple of the, this is the traditional coil where you have an alligator clip that you can clip to whatever level of inductance you want in the coil. And this essentially electrically shortens the antenna by doing this. And so I'll take a couple of the turns and put them into the antenna to get the extra length I need. If I need 40 meters, I'm going further down. And then of course that blue line on the bottom is a counterpose, and you at least one. If you're using things like the buddy pole system, they're pretty much using one. But again, it's the same like any other situation. The more counterpose, the better your situation will be. And oftentimes it's the length of the counterpose that you're using to adjust the SWR, not so much adjusting the size of the whip at some point. I also have used this when I need more into 40 and 80 meters. I will, if I'm near a tree, I can throw a line up in the tree, and then I replace the whip with wire. And then I screw a bolt in with the connector, with the lug that goes the wire into the coil. And then I have the lower frequencies, and I can have a longer length of a whip, so to speak, by using the wire. So very easy. The one thing you have to do with these things is you have to make sure the tripod's anchored. It's not hard for these things to start moving. And so you want to anchor it with a sandbag or tie it down, use a stake, etc. I use, I have a cheap, this is one of the things I would recommend if you like doing this kind of thing, is to buy yourself at Goodwill or somewhere a very cheap tripod. It doesn't have to be a super duper tripod. It just has to be enough to get to hold the thing up. And what I do is I take off most tripods, their camera heads will unscrew and you can remove it. And so that you now can utilize that to hold your setup. And this could be, this is not uncommon. It's a very common way of going. You can make the coil yourself. You can buy the whip, or you can use wire. You can buy the coils. MFJ has those coils. You can, and also, as you'll see in a minute, you can actually set these up a little bit differently as well. But these are really quick and easy. I remember the last time I did this, I was on a road trip driving between, I basically made a 3,000-mile trek to the west, and I would go sit up in my campsite, 15 minutes I had this set up. I remember being in Prescott, Arizona, talking to a guy who was homesteading in the middle of BC from Prescott on 35 watts. So it was a good day for me, especially since I live in the middle of Seattle and my noise level is S7. So to be camping is a real joy to me because my noise level is like S1 and I can, oh, wow, there's so many stations out there I never heard before. So that's always great when camping is I get the lower noise level. Again, you don't have to go with a 16-foot telescoping whip. You want to think about what frequencies you want to operate on. You don't have to go for a loading coil because, again, if you're not operating in the 40-meter, 80-meter, even bands, you're not necessarily going to need to have a loading coil to help you out. So again, decide what you want, where you want to operate, determines what you're going to bring, how much investment you're going to have. But again, you're going to need to match this. And if you're using coax, you still have an unmatched line, and at least you want to use a 1-to-1 balun in this situation. And of course, as you can see, we're low to the ground, so inherently our impedances will be lower than 50 ohms. Another multi-band vertical quarter wave is a variation of this kind of setup. This is, if you've ever heard of DX Commander, that antenna, this is basically what the DX Commander is. It is a antenna where They basically have quarter wave dipoles that are mounted around the antenna to a common feed point. Again, path of least impedance, and then a series of counterpose. And these are ground radios, whatever you'd like to call them. Ideally, in this kind of configuration, just like in any kind of ground plane antenna, you want a lot of ground radials. That's the ideal situation. 4 will get you by, 6 will get you by, but the point of diminishing returns is about 60. And some people will say 120, but about 60. Is that practical for most applications? No, especially for the field. So if you can get 4 ground radials down in a field situation, you're doing good. For me, oftentimes I've got 1 or 2. And what I can do is rotate the ground radial in different directions, which will actually change the propagation angle slightly as I do that. But the more ground radials, the better. However, again, what's the complexity of your setup? How much room do you have? How much weight do you want to carry? Oftentimes when people are creating these ground radial systems for, camping or hiking operations, what they'll do is have a special plate that has, if you want to think of that blue circle, which is all plastic, by the way, or because it's usually just a feed through for the wires going up vertically, you can make that all metal, aluminum, and you can have that with a wing nut on it, and each one of your radials can come in on that on the ground underneath the mast, and that would be sufficient. And then you can have that all pre-wired up and rolled together, and then you can just unroll it when the time comes and stake it into the ground. So a lot of different ways of configuring. And you'll also see this configuration as well, where the blue lines, the blue mounts for each wire will actually come off at a longer angle. So you'll have it so that it almost looks like a fan dipole vertically, where everything comes off at a different angle. So in this case, everything's coming off in the same angle and the same, basically straight up and down. In the case of another configuration of this, think of that one coming off at 20 degrees, one coming off at 30 degrees, and they're all coming at different angles, at different lengths out from the mast. And this way you'll get less interference with each other, but also it will change the propagation a little bit. But generally speaking, this is just one variation of a number of different themes on of a multi-band vertical quarter wave. And again, it's not difficult to have this ready to go and come back up very easily. But it is, it's not something you normally would then take on a backpack and go with, but on the car you might. A very popular one for SOTA and other operations is the end-fed half-wave dipole. This one is, again, I show a mast, but again, you can throw it up in a tree. It can be arranged as a sloper. The key here is that it is, there's a lot of discussion on whether you need a ground radial or not. If you use a ground radial, one of the things that in the literature you'll find, it says, well, at that point, you're kind of like an unbalanced off-center fed dipole, and you're not really an end-fed half-wave dipole. You're more like a regular dipole in an off-center fed configuration. And some people say no. So I'll leave that to people who like to do the antenna modeling to figure that one out. However, it is unbalanced. And because it's unbalanced, you're going to have RF back to your radio. Now, normally you put a ground stake. That's what I'm showing here is you put a ground stake is the minimum on this antenna. And you want a couple of ground stakes if you can hammer them into the ground. And that will help you in siphoning and obviously in lightning arresting, but also in helping siphon off some of that RF coming down the braid. When you do a ground radial, the recommendation is to use two ground radials to handle maybe 1 or 2 frequencies. The biggest thing to understand is that when you're at the end of the antenna like that, the impedances are very, very high. And that's why I use a 49-to-1 or even higher transformer to transform the energy to an impedance that will be usable for your radio. Now, one of the things to understand is that this is an un-un. So a balun is balanced unbalanced, which is coax being unbalanced to dipole, which is ideally balanced. In this case, we do not have a balanced system. We don't have a left and right to this dipole. So we use an un, which is not a balun. It matches an unbalanced to an unbalanced line, and its job is simply impedance transformation. Now, a balun, as we'll go into later, is really has its primary function is to force the current or the voltage to be equal in both legs of the dipole. That's its primary function, to keep the balance in that system. I see some chats. I'll stop here. Is there any questions for me or comments?
I think it was about the first aid kit in the trailer. It's
Oh,
okay.
okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Another idea here is ham sticks. They're very popular. I know they're controversial. Most people will call them nice heaters. It depends on how you look at it. Look, the bottom line is you'd use the best antenna for where you are and how much you can spend and your logistics. And in some cases, if this is the best you can do, great. Make as many contacts as you can. There's nothing wrong with it. What you're looking at here is two different variations. One is, you can see on the left, you're seeing the dipole, you're seeing multiple ham sticks operating like a fan dipole. So in the case of the left side, it's actually the left side and the center are the same antenna system, but they are, you're looking at a different view so you can get a sense of how they're spread out. This is actually an arrangement that I have that I use in the field as well from time to time. And what I do is I don't use the octopus, which is what that silver device is that you can get from MFJ and others, where you can plug in different ham sticks to get the orientation that I'm showing on the left. In my case, I had enough scrap parts around that I made a mount that you can see right underneath the top view on the left. You see there's a mount, and that's the mount that I use. So each one of those antennas is mounted slightly above the other. And then I have a T-fitting with a coax that connects all those together down to the main coax in a balun, so that there's, again, it's a fan dipole automatic antenna switching. And so if that's what you've got available, go for it, use it. I also have two of those 16-foot whips. And so when I operate 20 meters in the field, I often will operate as a 20-meter dipole. And so that same mount you see on the left side in the gray is where I put my 16-foot whips, and they come down the mast a bit, and then I tie guy wires from the top of the mast to the ends of the whips to keep them from drooping, sort of in a triangular support arrangement. And then, of course, I support the antenna with 3 guys on the ground staked into the ground as well. And then on the far right, nothing says you can't use the ham sticks in the kind of buddy pole or vertical arrangement with a counterpose as well. So again, the idea is not to say there's a bad antenna, but to say when you look at weight, cost, and what you can do, and then these are a good solution. If you have the ability to do something different, there are better solutions. But the idea here is to be able to make contacts given all the constraints that you have in your situation. And so that's why I bring these up. And as Hamstick, I know as a brand, people have made these, so you can make them. They're not difficult to make. The typical Hamstick is about 8 feet long because they're 4 feet in each section. There are 2 sections, the whip, which is the top, and of course the loading coil. And it does have really low radiation efficiency because there's a lot of loss in that coil. However, again, it's better than not having anything if that's the choice. So again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Some people say never use them, but again, everything has its use in the right situation and the right parameters. So, and again, I've used it myself. Have I made contacts with it? Yes, I have. I have made contacts with it. Otherwise, I would throw them away. The other thing is people do take your magnetic loop for a walk. These are a little bit different than what you might do at home. This is generally speaking coax or helix loop. And you can buy, there's Chameleon makes these, you can make your own. Bottom line is that you need to have a QRP levels. The capacitor is not super duper. If you can look at your video right now and see my screen, my picture, here is here is the 100-watt variable capacitor I'll be using when I build my magnetic loop for home. So you don't have to go to, and this is fairly, these are used about $125. But you can, with the QRP operation, you can use butterfly capacitors, and they're much cheaper and lighter than that is. That's a fairly heavy vacuum capacitor. But they're very useful. People will say, well, they're not very efficient. No, they're not efficient when you use them in a configuration that they've not been optimized for. So when you optimize a magnetic loop antenna, your efficiencies will be oftentimes greater than 80%. In this configuration, I suspect the efficiency is significantly lower. Why? Because of weights and size, they're not at the right and best efficiency. If you look at, for example, and the efficiency will change as you change frequencies. What you have to do with the magnetic loop antenna is, because the bandwidth is very narrow, you have to basically tune it for ideally every frequency you're going to be on. And so there's I'm not just talking about the impedance tuning, but actually canceling out the inductance using the capacitor on the antenna so that you can get the right frequency to be optimized on that loop. But really nice, fast antennas to put up. They're relatively good antennas. And and at home, when you can optimize them properly and have automatic tuning on the capacitors remotely, they're excellent antennas. In fact, the reason I'm going for it is because I have such a small lot. My dipole antenna just does not do well in the small lot and the configurations in. So the magnetic loop antenna at like 85% efficiency is probably going to be an order of magnitude better than the dipole I have currently. So and again, there's commercial setups that you can buy. They're all pack in very well, or you can build one yourself. There's lots of plans and such online for doing that, and calculators. And if you like to go fishing for RF, there's always a cliff. You can always go fishing off the cliff for some RF here. And this kind of configuration is basically an end-fed half-wave antenna. You can also set this up as an L-shaped antenna as well. The only thing I caution you on is you have to be very safe with your setup. And but this is more, I don't see very many people doing that because I don't recommend people getting that close to a cliff. But I just thought I'd put that up there for fun. But this link here, great list of antenna configurations. This probably has like 100 different antenna configurations you can look up on it. So when I send this out, take a look at it. You'll see every kind of antenna you can imagine. And if you look at all of them, you'll start to realize that a lot of them are all variations of a dipole. A lot of them are all variations of a Yagi. A lot of them are all variations of, and because we have, just different flavors of some basic concepts. Of course, you can still take your Yagi with you. There's the kind of traditional arrow UHF, VHF Yagi on the right on a tripod. And then on the left is a J-pole, roll-up J-pole. I actually backpack and hike with a roll-up J-pole in my pack, and some rope and a little bit of a weight. Doesn't have to be much more than a couple of quarter 20 bolts or nuts on a piece of string. And I will throw that up if I need to. And I carry an HT with a rubber duck. But if I want to get more coverage for an emergency or something, I can throw this up in a tree and I can attach my HT, and I'm going to hit much better than with the rubber duck by itself. I actually have, when I motorcycled around, I had PVC tubing with some couplings that would extend when I'm parked on the motorcycle. I could attach that to the bar of the motorcycle, the back bar of the motorcycle where I lean against. I can attach that PVC pipe up into the on the bar, and I can suspend my J-pole as a vertical off the motorcycle and operate off the motorcycle. Those are my hardcore days, I guess. Then the other thing is a car as an antenna platform, which is what I'm kind of been moving towards now. And obviously you see on the right hand is the traditional screwdriver antenna. And here we have a coil, and you're just moving it up and down with a motor to make contacts at different places on this coil to change the electrical length of this antenna. Hey, that's exactly the same thing as we saw here. This coil here, we did manually move it up and down with our connector, with our alligator clip, so to speak. And here we're using a motor drive to do the same thing, but it's the same basic antenna. It's a type of quarter wave ground plane. Now, what's really important when you're working on a car installation is to have correct grounding on your car to your radio. And grounds are a little bit more difficult on cars than they used to be. When cars were 100% all metal, it was a lot easier to get a continuous ground. So there's lots of documentation online if you want to look at how to get the best ground possible on your antenna. And this is, of course, an HF antenna. Now, go ahead. Somebody had a question or comment? No? Okay. The thing to also keep in mind is the impedances are much lower on a mobile situation. So when you're trying to build your matching system for your radio, keep that in mind. You're going to have to do some transformation in that process. On my car, I have 2 lip mount antennas, mounts. One, and they're both NMO. One is on the back hatch of my car where my day-to-day VHF, UHF dual band radio antenna is. And that is in the back of the car. And the reason it's in the back of the car is because otherwise I have to be very cognizant of where I'm driving. And I would knock my antenna off the roof constantly if I wasn't aware where I was driving. So around the city, because I don't have to worry so much about antenna placement to hit the repeaters around the city, I use my antenna towards the back of the vehicle on a lip mount of the hatch. But I also have on the roof rack, on a crossbar, I have another mount. And so if I'm driving long distance, I'll move my antenna to the top of the roof. And I actually have a VHF, UHF counterpose on the roof rack that goes with the mount. But on the left side, you see 2 other things I carry with me. There are times I want to operate. I have a Toyota Sienna minivan, and I oftentimes when I'm camping, it's set up for me to sleep in that van and also to operate my radio from inside the van. And so what I use is I create an antenna platform. I have a 259 connector. If I want to use my tripod in one of my mast and the antenna, I can then basically take my coax from my mast and my antenna on the mast and run it to one of the mounts on the car and then pick it up from inside the car. Or if I'm running, remember the coil and the whip? Well, here on the middle one is where I can screw the coil and then the whip in on the top of the car, throw out additional ground plane wires over the top of the car. And now I'm able to operate my quarter wave ground plane using my car as the base for that. And of course I need to tie off to the roof rack or tie off to other places when I'm using long whips on top of the car.
Dave?
Yeah, go ahead.
John, N7AME. Chris Wotis, K7II, and I went on 7QP, and I've got a minivan, and I threw a screwdriver up on the roof with magnets, those 95-pound magnets.
Yep.
And then I took a strap and grounded it to the frame, and it worked relatively well for I think we were out there for 15 hours, driving around the state and into Oregon and back up. And it worked quite nicely. I love the screwdriver. I've had one for probably 20 years.
Yeah, and I will say that I'm a fan of them too. I don't own one. It's on my wish list. One of the problems I have with what in my neighborhood, I have a neighborhood that is not a really wonderful, it's getting to be a wonderful place, but it's not unusual to have your cars broken into, stolen, your house broken into, stolen, guns firing, people, and all sorts of crazy stuff. So I try not to make my car an attractive nuisance. So I go incognito very often on it with antennas and such. So I have to be careful. But yeah, absolutely. And you're really pointing out a good point, is that height and a good ground plane really help. That's part of your antenna system, right?
Yeah,
it really helps.
Now I have a metal panel on the back of my pickup with the screwdriver, and that seems to work fairly well. I try and do as many parks on the air as I can, and for the last month or so I haven't been able to. But the screwdriver is a very good antenna. It's my second one actually. The first one, like you said, got stolen, but I bought a little bigger coil on it, and it works much, much better.
What size whip antenna are you using on that?
I think it's a 63 or 65 inch. And yes, I have to take it off every time I go into a parking garage.
Yep. Yeah, and then a lot of people do put them towards lower, like you saw on the picture before. A lot of people put them down here, but again, let me ask you this question. My hypothesis would be, of course, like any antenna, getting it on the roof would be better than putting it on the side of the car like this.
Mine, I built this panel, a metal panel that's midway on my bed of my truck.
Okay.
And it's up on the rails, so that's high. And it seems to work okay. Of course, it's a little tough putting stuff in the pickup, but
you know, that's secondary. You got it.
that's secondary.
That's secondary. Having an antenna platform is always primary.
That's right.
Let's get our priorities straight. And also helpful when you have the antenna mounted up, it's really helpful because people come over and say, can you help me with moving some stuff with my truck? Well, you know, I wish I could, but I can't mess up my antenna setup. That's a built-in excuse. This is actually, you know, I do on field day. This is actually at Fort Flagler with the Mike and Key group. A lot of times I go off on my own for field day, but this time I was with the club. This is at the group campsite wagon wheel. What you're not seeing is around me is probably another 35 setups, plus the normal, you know, NSA listening posts that we set up on the bluff with all the different towers and such. But what I do is every field day I practice on building a wacky antenna. And so what you're looking at is on the top of that is a wooden patio umbrella. And what I've done is created a Moxum antenna, of multi-band Moxum antenna around that. And that was my wacky antenna for the day, for the weekend. And so every year on field day, I design and build another antenna to see if it works. Some work better than others. Some, you know, are really good. And so it's just my way of experimenting with antennas is oftentimes field day. And so this is my older car, my Uplander, and everything obviously fits inside of there. And this was kind of funny. A couple weekends ago, I was on the radio during the day talking to somebody, and I said, "Hey, how are you doing?" And we were talking. He says, "I'm bicycle mobile." I said, "Oh, that's great. What antenna are you using?" He says, "I'm using a hex beam." I said, "No, you're pulling my leg." He says, "No, really, I'm bicycle mobile. I'm using a hex beam." I said, I just couldn't. I said, frankly, I couldn't even see how you even transport that. But a hex beam generally is 11 feet in diameter, like an upside down umbrella, multi-band antenna. It's kind of another variation of a Moxum or fan dipole in some respects. Well, no, it's a beam. It's a 2-wire beam antenna. Sorry, and it's usually up about 20 or 30 feet, ideally. So when he said it was bicycle mobile using a hex beam, I was really impressed. So I know it's if it's okay, I have about 15 more minutes if you want to stay a little longer, or I can stop here. I was going to talk a little bit about, you know, some of the matching systems and such. I'll stop and see if there's any questions or comments, and I can go on if people want.
I'd like to hear the rest of it, but if there's any questions, people should go ahead.
Any questions or comments? I know I didn't cover every possible antenna. I just want to focus on portable. All right, shall I continue on a bit?
Yes, please.
Okay, I know I'm
Yeah.
a little over.
We still have 31 people, so
Okay.
let's keep going.
So when we talk about who stole my RF, because at the end of the day, if it's not radiating, it doesn't have any value, right? Every watt that doesn't radiate is worthless watt to you. And so where are those losses coming from? Generally, it can come from coax. You know, if you have different frequencies, have different reactions to coax and different lengths of coax, there's losses in the coax. And the higher frequency you go, the more losses you'll have per 100 feet of coax. So a coax that's really good at HF is not going to be necessarily good in the VHF, UHF range. Connectors, oftentimes if you may have connectors that are bad quality, or over the years they may have corroded. These are all areas that create resistive losses. Obviously, we've kind of talked a little about this, antenna design and location. If your antenna is a marginal design, if your location is marginal, like my dipole antenna, off-center fed dipole antenna at my house, when they built another house right next to me, you know, when that went on a hill, all of a sudden my antenna got trapped between two buildings. And that was not a great situation. Or your physical ground is lousy in conductivity, or you're relatively close on an RF point of view to a metal roof, and it's changing the propagation and balance of your dipole antenna. All sorts of things affect losses from your antenna design and its location from ideal. And of course, the thing I want to focus on right now is impedance issues, because if you didn't get all the power to the antenna, there's no way you're getting any value. So if you're running 100 watts and you're getting 3 watts coming out of your antenna, that's a really big loss of value that you have. And you want to fix that if you want to get your antenna to be able to give you the maximum range as possible. So to maximize power transfer, you have to have the impedances match. The source's output impedance, that's the transmitters, has to be equal to the antennas. But as you guys all know, given the antenna dimensions and height are fixed, the impedance will change as you move across the band. So given the fact that your impedance is only right at one frequency for most antennas, there are things that will change that. Like if you have an antenna like a stepper IR or something you've built like that, that you can actually physically change the dimensions of the antenna as you change frequency. So the resonant frequencies is changing as you change frequency. That's a different story. But for most of us, our antenna characteristics are fixed. So we're only good at one frequency. Sort of like a tuning fork is only good at one frequency. And so when you move away from that frequency, you're going to have losses. The antenna is going to start to have losses. Some of the RF is not going to get radiated to the antenna, through the antenna. And you have two choices for matching the impedance. One is resistive and one is reactive. Resistive is great because it's simple. It's easy. You have a fixed value. You have no RF losses. Great. However, it has some, it does have losses. I'm sorry, I didn't say it doesn't have losses. It's a fixed value. It's really quick and easy, but it does have losses that you're adding to the system. So where you have some gains, you also have some losses. The other way to go is reactive, which is what most of us do. And here you'll have no losses if it's correctly done, but the values will change with frequency. And that's the problem, right? You can have one where you have losses that you have no change in by frequency, and one where you will have, where you have losses, but you'll change in frequency. But reactive ones, you will have no losses, but the values will change. And so it's more complex to deal with reactive adjustments than it is with the resistive adjustments. And what happens to impedance at resonance, as we all know, we have the ohmic resistance, we have capacitive reactance and inductive reactance. When we're at resonance in a series circuit, then we're going to have the capacitive reactance cancel out the inductive reactance, and we're only left with the ohmic resistance. And ideally, that will be hopefully at 50 ohms if everything is done well. Of course, it may not be 50 ohms because of different heights, different setups that we'll have to compensate for. But again, you can see from the graph that once we are moving away from the impedance point, you can look at the green line. Once we move away from the resonant point, our impedance is going to be going up, and it starts going up fairly rapidly. This is assuming, for example, a center-fed dipole. So, as I said before, an antenna is an ecosystem, and when we design antennas, it's in free space, but the things around the antenna, of course, will affect the antenna as well. And here's an example of how height affects the impedance of your system. As you increase the height of the antenna, the impedance of the system will change up to a certain point. And of course, the interactions with buildings and other structures around it. There are also times, because you're in non-free space situations, you may have an antenna that is a dipole, but in reality, which you will never really know, is it's really not a balanced line at all. It's an unbalanced line. Things are affecting around it so that it's no longer a balanced line. You may not know that, but just be aware that that's the case, especially when you're sighting your antenna. You're going like, okay, it's not going to be as balanced as I thought. The impedances, if you're wondering why the impedances don't match the model, it could be that surroundings are what's causing your problem. Now, will an antenna radiate if the impedance is not matched? Of course it will radiate if the impedance is matched. It's just how much energy will radiate. And as you can see by the standard graph, we usually use 1.5 as the boundary conditions. that this antenna will function fairly well with with acceptable losses in the 20-meter band with this kind of plot. So this is why we talk about SWR, starting wave ratio. It's just a ratio. It can be used as this, the ratio will be the same. It's the power ratio, forward of reflected, or it's the impedance ratio, or it's the current ratio. These will all come out to be the same number, no matter what you use. So it depends on what you measure, but you'll get the same SWR. And the situation we're trying to go for is something close to 1.1. If you have an ideal system, it'll be probably more like 1 to 1.2 because the impedances are not exactly 50 ohms in a dipole and in a situation. And of course, your radio will usually tolerate 2 or less. We generally try to design the antenna so it's 1.5 or less, and as a better acceptable limit with minimal losses. And the 1.5 in this case, I'm defining as the bandwidth of the antenna. So you can see this is about 13.9 to about 14.35 is the bandwidth of this antenna, given an SWR of 1.5. Now, balance, as I said earlier, are not impedance matching devices. And impedance matching devices are not balams. And this is really important to keep in mind. Antenna feed point matching, we generally are good for one band. You don't consider a separate antenna when you don't consider a separate antenna tuner. And they're connecting the feed point at a location that matches the desired impedance. So you can add inductance or capacitance to obtain the desired reading. There are only certain antennas today that we usually do this, but this is not unusual to be done in some antennas. So as we talked about earlier, the feed point impedance will change as I change the feed point. So if you look at the bottom, there's the end fed with a high impedance. This is, and then you see the middle is the off center fed, and the one at the top is the center fed. And each of these will have a different impedance, 50 ohms, potentially 200 ohms, 3,000 ohms. That's the kind of ranges that we can see, or higher, depending on the situation. And we can match it by looking at, well, somewhere along this line, as you can see, the feed point impedance is changing. Somewhere along that line, there is a place to put my feed point system, basically my ladder line or whatever, to this antenna that will create a match to my transmitter. And that is a delta match. You can see the kind of the triangular form here is a delta match. We're actually wiring to the antenna, where the distance between these legs of the delta are changing with the kind of impedance that we're trying to match. So at different locations at the antenna. And we can also put capacitance there to further help that match and create a T match, where you can now adjust the capacitance to further negate the inductance of this antenna and improve the impedance matching. However, this is only going to work for one frequency. A gamma match is a type of T match. It's like half of a T match. You'll see these a lot in Yagi antennas. They're very often used in Yagi antennas. If you have an arrow Yagi antenna, you'll see one of these. It's basically a capacitor. And what we do is we're adjusting this variable capacitor. It's a metal tube with a piece of metal and an insulator. There's the capacitor that you can now move in and out to change the capacitance using the shorting bar to now create a capacitance that negates out the inductive reactance. And you'll often see these as people have taken a metal tube, stripped the braid off and the outside insulator or coating off of a coax, and they'll use the dielectric and the center conductor to form the major part of the capacitor in this kind of setup. And that's a gamma match. It's all they're doing is you're trying to use a capacitance to cancel out the inductive reactance. A hairpin match is basically doing the opposite. It's taking inductive reactance to cancel out the capacitive reactance. And again, you'll see these on Yagis. I have a 15 element 2-meter beam that actually uses a hairpin match. If you build a tape measure antenna, you'll see a hairpin match or inductive match here. And you can see we have a split director. And then we're putting basically what you're seeing here in this square is really a loop, which is an inductance. And we're using this inductance by adjusting the length of this inductor and shape. We can then cancel out the capacitive reactance for this measure. Again, this is only for one frequency. That's why you only see these oftentimes on monoband antennas. Back in the shack, you have an antenna tuner, which of course is a terrible name because it's really a transformer. And what we're doing here is using various reactive components to create a balanced impedance match between the transformer and the antenna. The L network, which is good low pass characteristics, the Pi network, it's basically a conversion of an L network. And by setting, you can make this into an L network by setting one capacitor to a value of 0. It's used to match high impedance to source to a low impedance load. And then the T network, which I think is fairly common, is good high pass characteristics and really good for multi-band applications. So most tuners I see are T network tuners, but they're still L's and Pi's, and they're still good for what they do. There's nothing wrong with them, but most have T networks. And then I'll just finish up with the common mode currents, which is the balance stuff. And what's really funny here, this is the really funny thing, is RF is really spooky. Let's just put it that way. Because of the skin effect, it has some spooky effects. So here we have a model on the right where we see I sub B, the current coming up the braid, and we see the current I sub A coming down from the center of the coax. We see the A and B sides are the dipole, left and right dipole, and we're seeing the currents coming down on the right side in this part of the cycle and going up on the left side of this part of the cycle. However, with coax and this is a dipole being a matched line where the currents and voltages need to be balanced on both sides. That is, the left side will be when it's on one cycle, will be a mirror of the other side on the other part of the cycle. But what's happening with the coax is that we have on the braid, and the braid can actually, if we don't have, because the coax is not balanced, we can have some current that's going to go in reverse on the other side of the coax braid. So in other words, you can flow on both sides of the wire. And that's what's happening when we have common mode currents, is we have a situation we have currents flowing on the opposite side of the wire. That's how come it's kind of weird, because you don't think normally of current flowing in two directions in one wire. That's very deep, because that was our DC thinking says you can only go in one direction. But because of the skin effect, we can actually go down a wire in two different directions. And that's what's happening with coax and why it's unbalanced compared to a dipole. And so you have to do something that will then isolate the coax from the dipole and transfer the energy. And that's what a balun does. A balun is basically getting, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because of time. This was actually a different ham club. I did this for a full hour. So I tried to bring it together. What you're doing with a balun is you are trying to basically cancel out that common mode current that's flowing in the opposite direction from where it should be. And basically this is a folded balun, and the green line is basically taking the braid current coming down as a loss and canceling out with the current being shorted back up to the leg of the dipole. And so this is one way of doing it, and balancing and forcing a balance in line. So a balun is trying to force all the currents on the dipole to be equal, or voltage on the dipole to be equal, relative to the unbalancedness of the coax. There is no impedance transformation going on here. That's not its job. Its job is just to force it. And if you have a choice, you want, on a dipole match, you want a current-based balun, not a voltage-based balun, because it's the current that's doing the work. It's the current that's causing the radiation. So you want to make sure the current is balanced over the voltage being balanced. But you want to choose one that's best designed for your antenna. Now, the question you really want to find out is why are there 4-to-1 baluns and 1-to-1 baluns and 6-to-1 baluns? And that's because there are baluns like the 4-to-1 that they actually are doing two things. One is the balun's job of balancing, making sure there's balanced currents in the lines. And the second is it's a impedance transformer built in. So the impedance transformation, anytime you have a balun that's more than 1-to-1, there's impedance transformation built in. So one way of looking at it is, if I connect a standard 1-to-1 balun to a un, I have a 4-to-1 or 9-to-1 or 49-to-1 balun in that nomenclature. So basically, in a 4-to-1, 6-to-1, 9-to-1, whatever balun, you're doing two functions. The balun function and the impedance transformation function. Ideally, you would want to have the antenna tuner at the antenna's feed point because that's the end of the line, and that's where you want to force everything to be as equal as possible. But that's not always practical or cost effective. So that's why we often have our antenna tuners in the shack. And UNUN, as I mentioned earlier, is only doing impedance transformation. It is not doing any balun work, but you don't usually use an UNUN in a balance situation. It's a random wire, it's an end fed. That's where you generally use an UNUN. And again, all these are pretty simple to make. They look complex on the surface, but there's lots of stuff on YouTube and other places to build your own if you want to. Much cheaper to build your own than to buy one if you want. However, you want to make sure this ferrite core is correct for the amount of power that you're going to use and for the frequencies you're going to use. And so if you're at home, this ferrite, this toroid is going to be, let's say, in 2 inches in diameter. But if you're using QRP in the field, it could be a 1/2 inch in diameter. So again, different weights and different sizes of wire because you're using less power. So I kind of give you a shotgun situation here with lots of stuff, big, or they say fire hose. So if you have any questions, we can take them now. If you want to email me questions, I'm happy to take them. But I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity. I know it's been a kind of a fire hose of information. But again, let me take any questions or comments. And again, thank you for letting me talk to you guys today.
Hey, Dave, thank you. That was really awesome. And then I guess one other thing to point out on the balance is, and you kind of touched on it, but didn't go there, but is the type of material it's made out of and the permeability, so forth and so on. But excellent.
Yep. And I didn't go, you're right. I didn't go there because I was worried about the time. Other questions or comments? Okay. With that in mind, thank you again and if you want to email me or give me any suggestions for this presentation for the future, feel free to drop me a line. Have a good weekend.
I have one question.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Sorry. I hope you can hear me okay. Are you familiar with the Isotron antennas?
Yeah, I'm familiar with them. They were very popular a number of years ago. I don't remember. I can see them in my head, but I don't remember the details of their design. I think they were trying to be a type of magnetic loop antenna, if I remember, but I can't remember.
Yeah, I wanted to get some kind of, I don't know anybody who owns one, but I've owned one, I don't know, for probably 15 years. And, you know, for the first, I don't know, 9 years, it didn't work until I relocated it. And now the performance is way better. So yeah, I thought you might have some experience with that.
That's a good point. I mean, you just emphasized the point about what I said earlier. The antenna is in an ecosystem. It's not by itself. And wherever it's located, it's going to affect it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's all that I have.
No, good. Thanks. Any other questions or comments? Okay. You guys have a fantastic rest of the weekend.
Thank you. That was awesome.
Thank you, Dave.
We really, really appreciate it. It was great.
Did Mary have something?
Oh, just thanks.
Okay. Thank you, David. Great presentation.
Yep.
Oh. Well, I think that does it. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Dave, for running that, and put your antenna up, get it up there.
What's up?
All have a nice weekend.
Okay, I'm gonna stop recording here.
Think so.